The smell of hay and leather filled the lower levels of Sanctuary Station, far below, where diplomats and warriors discussed matters of galactic importance. Owen Fletcher pushed a wheelbarrow full of fresh bedding through the wide corridors, his boots making soft sounds against the metal floor. Nobody looked at him. Nobody ever did. To the dozens of species that passed through these stables, humans were just another servant race, barely worth acknowledging. Owen didn't mind. He preferred the company of animals anyway. The stables stretched for nearly half a mile, housing hundreds of creatures from across known space. Some diplomats rode mechanical transports, but the old families still preferred living mounts. It was a status symbol, a connection to ancient traditions. Owen had been working here for 2 years, ever since his colony ship had deposited his family on a human settlement world nearby. The pay was decent, and the work was honest. More importantly, the animals didn't judge him for being human. He reached the stall of a Thoraxian battle lizard, a massive creature with scales like polished bronze. The beast had been agitated all morning, pacing and hissing at anyone who came near. Its owner, a Thoraxian general, had complained 3 times already. 2 other stable hands had tried to calm it and received warning snaps for their efforts. They had used shock prods and restraints, which only made things worse. Owen set down his wheelbarrow and simply stood outside the stall, waiting. The lizard stopped pacing and fixed one large eye on him. He could see the tension in its shoulders, the way its tail twitched. Something was wrong, but it wasn't aggression. It was pain. "Let me guess," Owen said quietly. "Your shoulder hurts. Those idiots probably yanked on your reins too hard yesterday." The lizard tilted its head. Owen moved slowly, keeping his hands visible. He opened the stall door just enough to slip inside, then closed it behind him. The battle lizard could have killed him with one bite, but it simply watched as he approached. Owen had learned long ago that most creatures weren't naturally violent. They just reacted to how they were treated. He ran his hand along the lizard's neck, feeling for tension. When he reached the left shoulder, the creature flinched. There it was. Owen spent the next 20 minutes massaging the muscle, working out the knot while humming an old tune his grandmother used to sing. By the time he finished, the battle lizard was leaning into his touch, making a rumbling sound of contentment. "Better?" Owen asked. The lizard bumped its head gently against his chest. He smiled and gave it a final pat before leaving the stall. That was when he noticed them. 3 figures stood at the end of the corridor, watching him. They were dragons, but unlike any he had seen before. Most dragons on the station were young, barely a few centuries old, their scales bright and their movements quick. These 3 were different. Their scales had a weathered quality, like ancient stone. One was gray as ash, another pale as ice, and the third was a deep charcoal color. They moved with careful deliberation, as if every step was considered. Owen froze. He had never seen dragons in the stable area before. They usually sent servants to handle their mounts. He bowed quickly, the way he had been taught. "Can I help you, honored ones?" The gray dragon, the one who looked like ash given form, stepped forward. His eyes were amber, filled with an intelligence that made Owen feel completely exposed. "You are the human stable hand." Owen Fletcher. It wasn't a question. Owen nodded anyway. "Yes, honored one. We arrived this morning," the dragon continued. "We are here for the summit. Our mounts were assigned to your care." "Of course," Owen said quickly. "I'll make sure they have everything they need. If you can tell me their requirements, we will tell you nothing," the ice-colored dragon said. Her voice was softer, but somehow more commanding. "We wish to see how you care for them without instruction." Owen felt a flutter of nervousness in his chest. This was clearly some kind of test, though he couldn't imagine why dragons would bother testing a human stable hand. "As you wish, honored ones. Where are your mounts being held?" "Stalls 40 through 42, the dark dragon said. "We will observe." They didn't leave. Owen realized they meant to watch him right now, immediately. He swallowed hard and nodded, pushing his wheelbarrow toward the designated stalls. His mind raced. Why would dragons care how a human treated their animals? And not just any dragons. These 3 carried themselves with an authority that made even the station's commanders seem like children. The first mount was a sky serpent, a long creature with wings like silk and scales that shimmered blue and silver. It was pacing its stall nervously, clearly uncomfortable in the enclosed space. Sky serpents were meant for open air, not metal rooms. The second was a cliff drake, stocky and powerful, with horns that curved back over its skull. The third was a storm rider, a rare creature that fed on electricity and could fly through lightning without harm. Owen approached the sky serpent first. He could feel the three ancient dragons watching his every move. The serpent hissed at him, coiling defensively. Owen didn't react with fear or aggression. Instead, he simply sat down outside the stall and waited. He had learned this technique from his father, back on Earth. Animals respected patience more than force. After several minutes, the sky serpent's hissing quieted. It watched Owen with suspicious eyes, but the defensive coiling relaxed slightly. Owen began to hum, the same tune he had used with the battle lizard. It was an old lullaby, something about stars and safe harbors. His grandmother had sung it to him when he was small and afraid of the dark. The sky serpent's head lowered slightly. Owen stood slowly and opened the stall, still humming. He stepped inside, keeping his movements smooth and predictable. The serpent could strike in an instant, but it didn't. Instead, it watched as Owen began to check the stall conditions. The water was stale. The perch was too low. The ventilation was poor. "You deserve better than this," Owen said softly. He spent the next hour improving the stall, raising the perch, installing a small fan he borrowed from storage, and bringing fresh water mixed with minerals sky serpents needed. The serpent watched him work, gradually moving closer. By the time he finished, it was resting its head on his shoulder. When Owen finally emerged from the stall, the three ancient dragons were still there, watching with unreadable expressions. The ash-gray one stepped forward, his amber eyes studying Owen's face. "Tell me, young human," he said slowly, "why do you treat these creatures with such care?" Owen blinked, confused by the question. "Because they deserve care, honored one. They didn't choose to be here. They're far from home, kept in small spaces, handled by people who don't understand them. The least I can do is make them comfortable." The three dragons exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some silent communication Owen couldn't interpret. Finally, the ice-colored dragon spoke. "What is your name again, child?" "Owen Fletcher, honored one. We are called the Old Guard," she said. "I'm Grandmother Frost. This is Grandfather Ash and Elder Smoke. We have lived for 3,000 years, and in that time, we have seen countless species rise and fall. We have forgotten more than most beings will ever learn." She paused, her ancient eyes fixed on Owen. "And yet, watching you work just now, we remembered something we had lost." Owen had no idea what to say to that. He simply stood there, covered in hay and animal musk, while three of the oldest beings in the galaxy studied him like he was a puzzle they needed to solve. Grandfather Ash finally spoke again. "Continue your work, Owen Fletcher. We will be watching." They left without another word, their massive forms disappearing down the corridor. Owen stood alone in the stable, wondering what had just happened, and why he felt like his entire life had just changed direction. He had no way of knowing how right he was. The summit began 3 days later with all the ceremony and tradition that dragon culture demanded. Owen heard about it from the other stable hands during their morning meal. Apparently, 7 major dragon clans had sent representatives, along with dozens of minor houses. The goal was to negotiate new territorial boundaries in the outer spiral, where several clans had overlapping claims. Everyone expected the talks to be difficult. Dragon pride was legendary, and territorial disputes had started wars that lasted centuries, but Owen's life didn't change much. He still cleaned stalls, fed animals, and tended to injuries. The only difference was that the Old Guard's mounts required his attention now. He had fallen into a routine with them. The sky serpent, which he privately called Whisper, had grown comfortable enough to eat from his hand. The cliff drake, steady, allowed Owen to clean its scales and trim its claws. The storm rider, Flash, was more difficult, constantly crackling with energy that made Owen's hair stand on end, but even it had started to tolerate his presence. What Owen didn't expect was that the Old Guard would visit him daily. They would arrive at different times, always unannounced, and simply watch them work. They never interfered or gave instructions. They just observed. It made Owen nervous at first, but he eventually learned to ignore them. Well, not ignore them exactly. Nobody could truly ignore 3 ancient dragons. But he learned to work as if they weren't there on the 4th day of the summit. Owen noticed something strange. The animals in the stables were becoming agitated. Not all of them, just the mounts belonging to the diplomats attending the summit. They paced, snapped at each other, and refused to eat. The battle lizards hissed constantly. The riding birds screeched at odd hours. Even the normally docile grass eaters stamped nervously in their stalls. Owen mentioned it to his supervisor, a Grexian who managed the entire stable complex. The supervisor dismissed it immediately. Animals are stupid. They get nervous for no reason. Just keep them quiet so they don't disturb the important people. But Owen knew better. Animals weren't stupid. They reacted to what they sensed around them. If the mounts were agitated, it meant their riders were stressed. And if the diplomats were stressed, it meant the summit wasn't going well, that he decided to try something. Late that night, after his shift officially ended, Owen returned to the stables. He brought a small speaker that played soft music, something with gentle rhythms and no harsh sounds. He set it up in a main corridor and let it play at low volume. Then he walked through the stables, stopping at each stall to spend a few minutes with its occupant. He didn't do anything special. He just stood with them, letting them know someone was there who meant no harm. Tea took hours. When he finally finished, the first hints of artificial dawn were lighting the station's ceiling panels. Owen was exhausted, his feet aching and his back sore. But the stables were quieter. The constant noise of distressed animals had faded to occasional sounds. Some of them were even sleeping. He turned to leave and nearly walked into Grandmother Frost. The ancient dragon stood in the corridor, blocking his path. Her ice blue scales seemed to glow in the dim light. Owen jumped back, his heart pounding. "Honored one, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there." "Peace, child," she said. Her voice was gentle, which somehow made it more commanding. "I have been watching you tonight. Tell me, why do you stay past your working hours to care for creatures that are not your responsibility?" Owen struggled to find words. They were upset. "I couldn't just leave them like that." "Why not? You are paid for specific hours. What these animals feel is not your concern once your shift ends. But it is my concern," Owen said, surprising himself with his firmness. "Just because I'm not being paid doesn't mean I stop caring. These animals are trapped here. They don't understand why their riders are angry or scared. They just feel it and don't know what to do with those feelings. Someone needs to help them." Grandmother Frost was silent for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered her massive head until her eyes were level with Owen's. "Do you know why the mounts are agitated, young human? Because the summit isn't going well. The summit is failing," she corrected. "Centuries of grudges have made negotiation impossible. Clan leaders refuse to compromise. Insults have been exchanged. 2 representatives have already left, and others threaten to follow. If the summit collapses, it will likely lead to conflict. Small conflicts become large ones. Large ones become wars that consume entire systems." Owen felt cold. "I had no idea it was that bad." "Few do. The leaders maintain appearances in public, but in private, they are preparing for violence." Grandmother Frost straightened to her full height. "You asked why the animals are upset. It is because their riders have already decided that peace is impossible. The beasts sense this. They feel the aggression, the preparation for battle, and it frightens them. Can anyone stop it? The old guard has tried. Grandfather Ash, Elder Smoke, and myself have spent 3,000 years learning wisdom. We have seen wars begin over pride and end in ashes. We counsel patience, compromise, understanding. But we are considered relics by the younger generations. They call us weak for suggesting peace. They say we have forgotten what it means to be dragons." Owen couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's insane. You're the oldest, the wisest. They should listen to you." "Should, yes. But wisdom is not respected in times of anger." Grandmother Frost studied him carefully. "You calmed the animals tonight with patience and presence. You did not use force or dominance. You simply showed them that calm was possible. This is what we have been trying to teach the clan leaders, but they refuse to listen. Perhaps they need a different kind of teacher. I don't understand, Honored One. You will, she said cryptically. Continue your work, Owen Fletcher, and prepare yourself. Change is coming, and you will be at its center whether you wish it or not. She left before Owen could ask what she meant. He stood alone in the quiet stables, feeling like he had just been pulled into something far bigger than himself. He didn't want to be at the center of anything. He was just a stable hand. Nobody important, nobody powerful. But as he walked back to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life of comfortable invisibility was about to end. The next morning, Owen arrived at work to find the entire stable in chaos. 2 mounts had gotten into a fight overnight, badly injuring each other. 3 others had broken out of their stalls and were running loose in the corridors. The Grexian supervisor was screaming orders while other stable hands ran around trying to catch the escaped animals. Nobody knew what had triggered it. Owen knew. The summit had gotten worse. Whatever was happening in those diplomatic chambers was affecting everything around it. Fear and anger spread like poison through water, touching everyone and everything that he spent the entire day helping to restore order. He caught one of the escaped animals, a nervous riding bird, by simply standing still and letting it come to him. He treated the injured mounts with careful hands, earning bites and scratches in the process, but never retaliating with violence. He spoke softly to frightened creatures and firmly to aggressive ones. By evening, the stables were mostly calm again, but Owen was covered in bruises and exhausted. The old guard visited him as the artificial sun set. All 3 of them this time. They found him sitting on a hay bale, too tired to even stand in their presence. Forgive me, Honored Ones, he mumbled. I can't seem to make my legs work right now. Rest, Grandfather Ash said. His voice was like distant thunder. You have earned it. We watch you today. You brought order to chaos without using force. You calmed aggression without returning it. This is no small thing. I just did my job, Owen said. No, Elder Smoke said. His dark scales seemed to absorb the light around him. You did far more. You've demonstrated something the clan leaders have forgotten. You showed that strength without wisdom is just violence. That power without patience is just destruction. Owen looked up at them, confused. I'm just a human. I'm not strong at all. Exactly, Grandmother Frost said. And that is why you understand what we have been trying to teach. You cannot rely on force, so you learn other ways. Ways that our kind once knew, but have forgotten in our arrogance. Grandfather Ash stepped forward. The summit will end tomorrow. The clan leaders will issue their final statements and leave. War will begin within a month, unless we can show them a different path. Owen's stomach dropped. What do you mean? We mean, Elder Smoke said slowly, that tomorrow you will teach the dragons a lesson they desperately need to learn, whether you are ready or not. The 3 ancient dragons left Owen sitting there, his exhaustion forgotten, his mind racing with fear and confusion. Teach dragons? Him? It was impossible. It was insane. But as he sat in the quiet stables, listening to the breathing of sleeping animals, Owen realized something. He had already been teaching in his own small way. He had been showing anyone who watched that there were alternatives to force and dominance. He had been proving, one calm moment at a time, that patience was stronger than violence. He just had no idea that anyone important had been paying attention. Tomorrow, apparently, he would find out just how wrong he was. The final day of the summit arrived with tension so thick Owen could feel it the moment he entered the stable. Every mount was on edge, some pacing frantically while others stood frozen in their stalls. The fear in their eyes was something Owen had rarely seen. These were creatures bred for battle and hardship, yet they trembled like frightened children. Owen did what he could to comfort them, but he was only one person. The other stable hands were too busy with their own assigned tasks to help. And even if they weren't, most of them didn't have the patience for this kind of work. They would use restraints and sedatives, which would only make things worse. Around midday, alarms rang through the station. Not emergency alarms, but ceremonial ones. Something important was happening. Owen ignored them and continued working, brushing down a nervous Cliff Drake that kept trying to bite him. He was so focused on the task that he didn't notice the crowd gathering outside the stables until someone cleared their throat loudly behind him. Owen turned and felt his blood run cold. The entire stable corridor was packed with dragons. Not just any dragons, but the summit delegates themselves. 7 clan leaders, each one a massive being radiating power and authority. Behind them stood dozens of advisors, warriors, and witnesses. And at the front of this crowd stood the old guard. Grandfather Ash's voice boomed through the stable. Owen Fletcher stepped forward. Owen's hands were shaking. He put down his brush carefully and walked to the corridor on unsteady legs. Every eye was on him. He had never felt so small, so insignificant. He was a human stable hand standing before the most powerful dragons in known space. This was either the greatest honor of his life or the last mistake he would ever make. Honored ones, Owen managed to say, bowing as deeply as he could. How can I serve you? The summit has failed, Grandmother Frost announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the stable. The clan leaders cannot agree. Pride and ancient grudges have made cooperation impossible. War is now inevitable. Several of the younger dragons made sounds of approval at this. Owen noticed they were standing straighter, their scales gleaming with barely contained aggression. These were warriors who had been told all their lives that strength meant dominance. The idea of war excited them. However, Elder Smoke continued. The old guard has issued a challenge. We claim that peace is not weakness. That understanding is not surrender. That true strength lies not in domination, but in wisdom. One of the clan leaders, a massive red dragon with scales like polished rubies, laughed. You have been saying this for days, ancient ones. We respect your age, but your time has passed. The strong survive. The weak are consumed. This is the way of dragons. This has always been the way. Then prove it, Grandfather Ash said calmly. We propose a test. Each side will demonstrate their philosophy. If dominance and force prove superior, we will accept war as inevitable and speak no more of peace. But if wisdom and understanding prove stronger, the clans will return to negotiations with open minds. The Red Clan leaders' eyes narrowed. What kind of test? A simple one, Grandmother Frost said. We will capture 3 wild stellar WIRMS. These creatures are savage, untamed, and extremely dangerous. 3 of your finest warriors will attempt to master them using traditional methods, force, fire, and dominance. If they succeed, you have proven your point. And when we succeed, what then? Another clan leader asked, this one covered in blue scales that looked like sapphires. Then we will ask this human stable hand to do the same task, Elder Smoke said, gesturing to Owen. The corridor exploded with noise. Dragons roared with laughter. Some looked offended that a human was even being mentioned in the same conversation as dragon warriors. The Red Clan leader actually had to wipe tears from his eyes. You would pit a human against our warriors? A creature that cannot fly, cannot breathe fire, cannot even lift a tenth of their own weight. The red dragon shook his head. Old ones, I respected you, but this is insulting. Humans are nothing. They are weak, short-lived, and primitive. This boy would be killed instantly. Owen agreed completely. He wanted to say this was insane, that he was just a stable hand, that he had no business being part of dragon politics. But one look at the old guard's faces told him this was not a debate. They had already decided, and nothing he said would change their minds. Grandfather Ash's voice cut through the laughter. Are you afraid then? Afraid that this weak, primitive human might succeed where your warriors fail? The laughter stopped. Dragon pride was a terrible thing. No clan leader could back down from such a challenge without appearing cowardly. The red dragon's eyes blazed with anger, but he nodded curtly. Very well, we accept your challenge. But when our warriors succeed and your human fails, you will cease your talk of peace and accept the coming war. Agreed, the old guard said in unison. Owen felt like he was going to be sick. He caught Grandmother Frost's eye, silently begging her to reconsider. She looked at him with something that might have been sympathy, but also certainty. She believed he could do this. The problem was, Owen had no idea why. The entire group moved to the station's largest cargo bay, a massive chamber normally used for storing ships and equipment. Today, it had been cleared and converted into an arena. Station security had captured 3 stellar WYRMS, creatures that lived in the vacuum of space and fed on radiation. They were distant cousins to dragons, but completely wild, never domesticated or tamed. Each one was the size of a small ship, covered in crystalline scales that sparkled with inner light. Their teeth were like shards of metal, and their claws could tear through hull plating. Owen had only seen stellar WYRMS in videos. In person, they were terrifying. They had been placed in separate containment fields, each one thrashing and screaming with rage at being captured. The sound they made was like tearing metal mixed with a storm wind. Several observers flinched at the noise. The Red Clan leader gestured to 3 young dragons who stepped forward. These were clearly elite warriors, each one moving with perfect confidence. Their scales were polished to a mirror shine, their claws sharp as blades. They looked at the stellar WYRMS the way predators looked at prey. "Begin," Grandfather Ash commanded. The first warrior approached the first WYRM. The containment field dropped, and the WYRM immediately lunged. The warrior met it with fire, a blast of flame so hot that Owen could feel it from 50 feet away. The WYRM screamed and recoiled. The warrior pressed the advantage, breathing more fire, using claws to rake the WRM scales, roaring dominance with every move. It was brutal and efficient. Within 10 minutes, the WYRM was cowering, its will broken by overwhelming force. The second warrior did much the same. This one used less fire and more physical dominance, actually grappling with the WYRM and forcing it to the ground through sheer strength. The WYRM fought back viciously, drawing blood, but eventually it too submitted. The third warrior was even faster, using a combination of fire, strength, and aerial superiority to overwhelm the WYRM in less than 5 minutes. When it was done, 3 stellar WYRMS lay subdued on the arena floor, their rage replaced with fear. The young dragons stood over them victoriously. The crowd of observers cheered. The clan leaders looked satisfied. The red dragon turned to the old guard with a smug expression. "Your turn, ancient ones. Send forth your human." Owen's legs felt like water. He looked at the 3 WYRMS, still dangerous despite their submission. They were breathing hard, injured from their battles, their scales cracked and bleeding. One was making a pitiful whimpering sound. They looked defeated and terrified. Grandmother Frost leaned down until her face was close to Owen's. "Remember what you did with the sky serpent," she whispered. "Remember what you do every day in the stables. You do not dominate. You do not force. You offer partnership." "They'll kill me," Owen whispered back. "Perhaps," she admitted, "but I do not think so. Trust yourself, Owen Fletcher. Trust what you know to be true." A 4th stellar WYRM was brought into the arena, this one captured just hours ago. Unlike the others, it hadn't been exhausted by battle. It was at full strength, full rage, and completely terrified. The containment field dropped, and the WYRM immediately tried to escape, slamming into the walls of the arena with enough force to shake the floor. Owen walked forward on shaking legs. Behind him, he heard someone in the crowd whisper, "The human is already dead." Part of him agreed, but another part, the part that had calmed hundreds of frightened animals, that had learned patience from his father and gentleness from his grandmother, knew what to do. Not because he was brave, not because he was strong, but because he understood something the dragon warriors didn't. Fear and pain could not be conquered. They could only be understood. Owen reached the center of the arena, and then he did something that made the entire crowd gasp. He sat down. He didn't approach the WYRM. He didn't try to capture it or dominate it. He simply sat on the cold floor, crossed his legs, and waited. The stellar WYRM circled him warily, its crystalline scales flashing with agitation. It could kill him in seconds. Everyone watching knew it. Owen knew it, but he didn't run. He didn't even look directly at the creature. He just sat there, breathing slowly, making himself as non-threatening as possible. And then, very quietly, he began to hum. The same lullaby his grandmother had taught him. The same song he had used with Whisper the Sky Serpent. An old earth melody about stars and safety, about coming home after a long journey. His voice was soft, almost lost in the massive arena. But in the sudden silence, everyone could hear it. The stellar WYRM stopped circling. Its head tilted, confused. This human wasn't attacking, wasn't trying to dominate, wasn't showing any aggression at all. The creature had expected violence. It had been preparing to fight for its life. But this strange, small being was just sitting there, making a sound that wasn't threatening. Owen continued humming. Minutes passed. The WYRM moved closer, cautious but curious. Owen still didn't look at it directly. He kept his eyes down, kept humming, kept breathing slowly. He could smell the creature now, a strange metallic scent mixed with ozone. He could feel the heat radiating from its crystalline scales. The WRM's head came within a few feet of Owen. One bite would end this. But Owen didn't flinch. He simply reached into his pocket, moving very slowly, and pulled out a piece of dried meat he had brought from the stables. It was meant for feeding the battle lizards, but it might work here. He sat on the ground between himself and the WYRM, then went back to humming. The stellar WYRM sniffed the meat. Then, moving with sudden gentleness, it took the offering. The crowd was utterly silent. Owen could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He reached out very slowly and touched the WRM's snout. The crystalline scales were warm, almost hot. The creature flinched but didn't pull away. Owen kept his hand there, still humming, still showing nothing but calm acceptance. "I know you're scared," Owen whispered. "I know you don't understand what's happening, but I'm not going to hurt you. I promise." The stellar WYRM made a sound, softer than before. Then, to the absolute shock of everyone watching, it lowered its massive head and rested it gently against Owen's chest. The human stable boy and the wild space creature sat together in the center of the arena, and the only sound was a quiet lullaby that spoke of stars and home. The silence in the arena stretched on. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. They were all watching Owen Fletcher, a human stable hand, sitting peacefully with a creature that should have killed him instantly. The stellar WRM's head still rested against his chest, its breathing slow and steady. The rage that had filled it moments ago was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like contentment. Owen slowly stood up, moving carefully so he wouldn't startle the creature. The WYRM raised its head and watched him with large, crystalline eyes. Owen could see intelligence there, mixed with confusion. This creature had expected violence. It had been captured, trapped, and terrified. But instead of more violence, it had found gentleness. It didn't know what to make of this strange human. Owen noticed the wounds on the WRM scales, small cracks where it had injured itself trying to escape the containment field. He reached out and gently touched one of the cracks. The WYRM flinched but allowed it. Owen wished he had proper medical supplies, but he didn't. All he could offer was careful attention and a soft voice. "You're hurt," Owen said quietly. "I'm sorry. Nobody should have captured you. You belong in space, flying free. But right now you're stuck here, and you're scared, and you're in pain. I can't fix all of that, but I can at least try to help." He spent the next several minutes carefully examining the WRM's injuries, speaking softly the entire time. He found a few places where the scales had been damaged and gently smoothed them down. It wouldn't heal the creature, but might make it more comfortable. The WYRM watched him work with what looked like growing trust. Finally, Owen stepped back. The WYRM could leave now. It could attack him. It could do anything. Instead, it moved closer and bumped its head gently against his shoulder, almost like a cat seeking affection. Owen couldn't help but smile. He reached up and scratched behind what might have been the creature's ear, and the WYRM made a rumbling sound of pleasure. That was when Grandfather Ash's voice boomed across the arena. "The test is complete." Owen had forgotten about the watching crowd. He turned and saw hundreds of faces staring at him, with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. The three dragon warriors who had subdued their WYRMS through force looked confused. The clan leaders seemed uncertain. Only the old guard looked satisfied. "Let us review what we have witnessed," Grandmother Frost said, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. 3 of your finest warriors faced 3 stellar WYRMS. They used fire, strength, and dominance. They succeeded in breaking the creature's wills through superior force. This is the old way, the traditional way, the way most of you believe is the only way. Several dragons nodded in agreement. The Red Clan leader looked smug. "Then we sent a human," Elder Smoke continued. "A creature with no fire, no claws, no physical power worth mentioning. He faced a stellar WYRM that was fresh, uninjured, and at full strength. And what did he do?" "He sat down," Grandfather Ash said. "He made himself vulnerable. He offered no threat. And in doing so, he achieved something your warriors did not. Look at their WYRMS." Everyone turned to look. The 3 WYRMS that had been subdued by force were still cowering on the arena floor. They were watching their captors with fear and hatred. They had submitted because they had no choice, but given the opportunity, they would clearly attack. They were broken, but not won over. "Now look at the humans' WYRM," Grandmother Frost commanded. The 4th WYRM was standing calmly beside Owen, still making that rumbling sound of contentment. It showed no fear, no aggression. It had not been broken. It had been befriended. "Your warriors proved that force can create submission," Grandfather Ash said. "But this human proved that patience can create partnership. Your warriors created fear. This human created trust. Tell me, clan leaders, which achievement is greater?" The Red Clan leader's scales darkened with anger. "This proves nothing. The human got lucky. The WYRM could have killed him at any moment. His method is too risky, too slow, too uncertain. Force is reliable. Force always works." "Does it?" Elder Smoke asked. "Tell me, if you release those 3 WYRMS right now, what would they do?" Nobody answered, but everyone knew. The WYRMS would attack their former captors. They would fight until they escaped or died. The submission created by force was temporary and fragile. "And if we released the human's WYRM?" Grandmother Frost asked. Owen had a feeling he knew the answer. He looked at the stellar WYRM and said quietly, "You can go if you want. The door is right there. I won't stop you." The WYRM looked at the open cargo bay door, clearly visible across the arena. It looked at Owen, then it settled down beside him and closed its eyes, apparently deciding it was comfortable right where it was. The message was clear. The WYRM was staying by choice, not force. The crowd erupted in noise. Dragons argued with each other, some insisting this was a trick, others demanding to know how a human had achieved what their warriors couldn't. The clan leaders looked uncertain now, their previous confidence shaken. Grandfather Ash raised his voice above the chaos. "Silence." The arena went quiet immediately. Even after 3,000 years, the old guard's authority commanded respect. "We will now explain what you have witnessed, because most of you have forgotten the truth that we learned in our youth." Grandmother Frost stepped forward, her ancient eyes sweeping across the crowd. 10,000 years ago, when our kind was young, we were not as you are now. We did not rule through dominance and fear. We understood that true strength came from connection, from understanding, from the ability to see beyond ourselves. We built alliances with other species not through conquest, but through mutual respect, Elder Smoke added. We learned from those who were different from us. We grew stronger not by dominating others, but by learning to work together. This is how dragon kind rose to greatness. But over time, we forgot, Grandfather Ash said sadly. We became proud. We began to believe that our physical power made us superior. We started to see force as the answer to every problem. We stopped listening to those who were different. We stopped trying to understand. We became what you are now, powerful but isolated, strong but alone. The Red Clan leader shook his head. You speak of ancient history. The galaxy has changed. Strength is all that matters now. Is it? Grandmother Frost asked. Look at this human. He has no strength, yet he achieved what your warriors could not. He has no fire, yet he created warmth where there was only fear. He has no claws, yet he reached across the gap between species and found connection. He did not do this through luck. He did this because his species never had the option of relying on force. Humans had to learn other ways to survive. Owen felt uncomfortable being discussed like this. He was just doing what seemed natural to him, what his father had taught him on their farm back on Earth. You treated animals with respect because it was right, not because it was strategic. Elder Smoke continued the explanation. Humans are weak by dragon standards. They cannot fly. They cannot breathe fire. They die after barely a century of life. They are, by every physical measure, inferior to dozens of species. Yet they have survived on a world that tried to kill them at every turn. Do you know how? Nobody answered. They survived through cooperation, Grandfather Ash said. Through empathy. Through the ability to form bonds with other creatures. Humans domesticated wolves into dogs, wild horses into companions, even predators into partners. They did not do this through dominance alone. They did it through understanding, through patience, through the willingness to see value in beings that were different from themselves. This is what we have forgotten, Grandmother Frost said. This is what we must remember if we are to avoid destroying ourselves. The human before you is not special. He is simply doing what his kind has always done, seeking connection instead of conquest, offering partnership instead of domination. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. The arena was silent again. Owen could see the dragons processing what they had heard. Some looked thoughtful. Others looked angry. The clan leaders looked troubled, their certainty about the upcoming war clearly shaken. The Bluescale clan leader finally spoke. What you say has merit, Ancient Ones. But even if we accept this lesson, how does it solve our territorial disputes? How does understanding help when two clans claim the same system? Grandfather Ash smiled, the first time Owen had seen such an expression on the ancient dragon's face. That is the correct question. And to answer it, we must ask ourselves, what did the human do that your warriors did not? He didn't fight, a young dragon said from the crowd. It was one of the warriors who had subdued a WYRM through force. He sounded confused but genuine. He just waited, let the WYRM come to him. Exactly, Elder Smoke said. He listened before he acted. He sought to understand before he tried to control. He offered respect and received it in return. These same principles apply to negotiation. You cannot force another clan to agree with you. You can only offer reasons, listen to their concerns, and find solutions that honor both parties. But what if they will not listen? The Red Clan leader demanded. What if they are unreasonable? Then you must ask yourself, Grandmother Frost said quietly, if you have truly listened to them, or if you have only waited for your turn to speak. The human sat in silence for many minutes before the WYRM approached. He did not rush. He did not demand. He simply showed that he was safe to approach. Have you shown the other clans that you're safe to negotiate with? Or have you spent your time proving how strong you are? The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Owen could see several clan leaders shifting uneasily. The truth was clearly hitting home. Return to the negotiating chamber, Grandfather Ash commanded. Try again, but this time, try the human's way. Listen before you speak. Seek to understand before you seek to be understood. Offer respect before you demand it. And see what happens. The clan leaders looked at each other. Finally, the red one nodded slowly. Very well, Ancient Ones. We'll try your way. But if it fails, Grandmother Frost interrupted, then you can return to your wars knowing you exhausted all other options. But we believe you will be surprised by what becomes possible when you approach others with open minds instead of closed fists. The crowd began to disperse, dragons leaving in small groups, deep in discussion. Owen stood beside his stellar WYRM, still not quite believing what had just happened. He had been used as a teaching tool for dragonkind. Him, a stable hand from Earth who just wanted to take care of animals. The old guard approached him, all three of them looking pleased. You did well, young human, Grandfather Ash said. I didn't do anything, Owen protested. I just treated the WYRM the way I treat all animals. Precisely, Grandmother Frost said. You showed them the truth, without trying to convince them. You demonstrated wisdom without claiming to be wise. This is the most powerful form of teaching. What happens now? Owen asked. Now, Elder Smoke said, we wait and see if they have learned the lesson. Some will, others will not. But seeds have been planted, and that is enough for today. The three ancient dragons left, leaving Owen alone with his new friend. The stellar WYRM was still resting beside him, apparently content. Owen sat down and leaned against its warm, crystalline scales, suddenly exhausted. He had just changed the course of dragon politics, possibly prevented a war, and taught beings who had lived for thousands of years. All by sitting down and humming a lullaby. His grandmother would have found that funny. She had always said the simplest truths were the most powerful. Owen was starting to believe she was right. The next 3 days were strange for Owen. The summit continued, but something had changed. Dragons who had previously ignored him now stopped to watch him work. Some even asked him questions, which terrified him at first. He was used to being invisible, a background figure that important people looked through rather than at. Now he was being seen, and he didn't know how to handle it. The stellar WYRM, which Owen had started calling Crystal because of its glittering scales, refused to leave his side. Station security initially tried to remove it back to containment, but the creature became so agitated that they gave up. The old guard stepped in and declared that Crystal was now under Owen's care. Nobody argued with the ancient ones, even if they thought the decision was strange. So Owen went about his normal work with a space creature following him everywhere. Crystal was surprisingly gentle, despite its size and power. It learned quickly that the stables had low ceilings and started moving more carefully. It watched Owen work with what seemed like genuine interest, sometimes making soft chirping sounds when Owen talked to the other animals. That on the second day after the demonstration, a young dragon approached Owen in the stables. She was smaller than the clan leaders, her scales a deep green color. She looked nervous, which was unusual for a dragon. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you Owen Fletcher?" The human who calmed the stellar WYRM. Owen was brushing down steady, the cliff drake. He paused and nodded. "Yes, honored one. Can I help you?" The young dragon looked around, as if making sure nobody else was listening. "I'm called River. I am having trouble with my mount. He will not listen to me anymore. I have tried everything the trainers taught me, but nothing works. My clan leader says I am weak, that I do not command enough respect. But I think—" She hesitated. "I think maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe the way I was taught is not the right way." Owen set down his brush and gave her his full attention. "What kind of mount do you have?" "A storm runner, like Elder Smoke's mount, but younger. His name is Thunder." River looked miserable. "He used to obey me perfectly. But 3 months ago, he started refusing my commands. Now he will not even let me approach him. The trainers say I should use discipline, pain if necessary, to remind him who is in control. But when I try—" She stopped, her voice breaking slightly. "It feels wrong. It feels cruel, and it does not work anyway. He just becomes more aggressive." Owen thought about this. Storm runners were intelligent creatures, proud and independent. Trying to dominate one through force would be like trying to control the wind with chains. "Can I see him?" River looked surprised, but hopeful. "You would do that? For me?" "Of course. That's my job." They walked to the far section of the stables where the larger mounts were kept. Thunder was in a reinforced stall, pacing back and forth with agitation. Owen could see the tension in every line of the creature's body. This was not just stubbornness. This was genuine distress. "Tell me about 3 months ago," Owen said. "What changed?" River thought for a moment. "That was when I was promoted to warrior status. I started training for combat missions. The schedule became more demanding. I had less time to spend with Thunder. And when I did have time, I was always tired, always stressed." She paused. "Oh." Owen nodded. "Animals sense what we feel. If you were stressed and tired every time you came to him, he would have felt that. He probably thought he had done something wrong, that you were angry with him. So he became defensive. But I was not angry at him. I was just tired. He doesn't know the difference," Owen explained gently. "All he knew was that you changed. You became someone who felt different, acted different. The bond you had built before started to break. River looked heartbroken. I had been making him miserable without meaning to, and then when the trainers told me to use force, I made it worse. I have been a terrible partner to him. No, Owen said firmly. You have been trying to do what you were taught, but you were taught wrong. The good news is you can rebuild the bond. It will take time and patience, but it's possible. Will you show me how? River asked, hope clear in her voice. Over the next hour, Owen worked with River and Thunder. He taught her to approach without expectations, to just be present without demanding anything. He showed her how to read the storm runner's body language, to understand what the creature was feeling. Most importantly, he taught her to bring calm with her, to leave her stress and worries outside the stall. That IT was slow work. Thunder was suspicious at first, clearly expecting more of the forceful training he had been subjected to. But gradually, as River followed Owen's instructions, the storm runner began to relax. By the end of the session, Thunder was allowing River to touch him again, though he was still wary. This is amazing, River breathed. I can feel the difference. He is actually listening to me. He always wanted to listen, Owen said. He was just too scared and confused to do it. Keep practicing this way. Spend time with him without expectations, and the bond will rebuild. Just remember, partnership, not dominance. River bowed deeply to Owen, a gesture of respect that made him uncomfortable. Thank you, human. You have given me back my partner. I will not forget this. As River left, Owen noticed other dragons watching from a distance. They had seen the session. Word would spread, and sure enough, over the next 2 days, more young dragons came to him. Some had problems with their mounts. Others just wanted to learn his methods. Owen found himself teaching dragon warriors how to communicate with their animals, showing them techniques his father had taught him years ago on a simple farm on Earth. The older dragons watched this with various reactions. Some were approving. Others were clearly disturbed by the idea that a human was teaching dragons anything. But none of them interfered, likely because the old guard made it clear that Owen was under their protection. That on the evening of the 3rd day, Owen was in his quarters, exhausted from a long day of work and teaching. Someone knocked on his door. When he opened it, he was shocked to find the Blue Scale clan leader standing there. Behind her were 2 other clan leaders he recognized from the summit. Honored ones. Owen stammered, bowing quickly. Please come in. His quarters were tiny and plain, definitely not suitable for hosting Dragon Clan leaders, but they entered anyway, folding their massive bodies to fit through the doorway. We will be brief, the blue-scaled leader said. I am called Ocean Depth. These are Mountain Root and Desert Wind. We come to tell you that the summit has succeeded. Owen blinked in surprise. Succeeded? But we thought war was inevitable as well, Mountain Root admitted. His scales were a rich brown color, like Earth. But after the demonstration with the stellar WYRM, we returned to negotiations. This time, we actually listened to each other. We set aside our pride and our assumptions, and we found solutions we had not seen before. Solutions that honor all parties, Desert Wind added. Her scales were a pale yellow, almost gold. We have agreed on territorial boundaries, trade arrangements, and mutual defense pacts. What seemed impossible 3 days ago is now accomplished. Ocean Depth looked at Owen with an expression he couldn't quite read. This happened because you showed us a different way, not through speeches or arguments, but through simple demonstration. You treated a wild creature with respect and patience, and it responded with trust. You reminded us that this same approach works with each other. I just did what seemed right, Owen said, uncomfortable with the praise. That is precisely why it worked, Mountain Root said. You did not try to teach us. You did not claim to be wise or special. You simply lived according to your principles, and we learned by watching. This is the most powerful form of teaching. We came to thank you, Desert Wind said, and to tell you that your actions have changed dragon culture, at least for those of us who are watching. We will spread this lesson to our clans. It will take time for everyone to accept it, but change has begun. After they left, Owen sat on his bed, his mind spinning. He had prevented a war, not through strength or grand speeches, but through patience and kindness, through treating a scared creature with respect. It seemed impossible that something so simple could have such large effects, But then he thought about his father, who had always said that small kindnesses ripple outward in ways we never see. He thought about his grandmother, who had taught him that lullaby and told him that gentleness was its own kind of strength. They had been teaching him wisdom all along, and he had never realized it. Crystal chirped from the corner where the stellar WYRM had curled up. The creature had insisted on following Owen to his quarters, and he hadn't had the heart to refuse. Owen smiled and reached out to scratch behind its crystalline ear. "What do you think about all this?" he asked the WYRM. "Did we really change anything, or will they go back to their old ways once they leave?" Crystal just rumbled contentedly and closed its eyes. Owen decided that was answer enough. Maybe change would stick, maybe it wouldn't. All he could do was continue living according to his principles and hope that others found value in them. The next morning, Owen returned to the stables to find a surprise waiting. Someone had installed a small desk in the corner of the main corridor, complete with a chair and a sign. The sign read, "Owen Fletcher, Specialist in Interspecies Communication and Animal Behavior." Owen stared at it in shock. "What is this?" His Grexian supervisor approached, looking pleased. "Official recognition from the Old Guard. They have declared you a specialist and given you authority to teach others your methods. You still work in the stables, but now you also train those who wish to learn. The pay is quite significant, I am told. Congratulations." Owen didn't know what to say. He had come to this station 2 years ago as a nobody, just another human trying to make his way in a galaxy that barely acknowledged his species existed. Now, he was a recognized specialist, someone that Dragon Clan leaders came to for wisdom that IT was overwhelming. It was terrifying, and despite his discomfort with attention, Owen had to admit it felt good. Not because of the status or the pay, but because he could now help more creatures, teach more people his father's lessons, spread his grandmother's wisdom about the power of gentleness. River appeared at his side, Thunder walking calmly beside her. The Storm Runner and his rider had clearly rebuilt their bond. "First lesson, teacher?" she asked with a smile. Owen smiled back. "First lesson, partnership, not dominance. Let's begin." Behind him, Crystal chirped approval, and the work continued. The stable boy who nobody believed could matter was now teaching the galaxy's most powerful species about the strength found in kindness. And in a universe that often measured worth by force and fire, that was perhaps the most revolutionary thing of all. 6 months passed, and Sanctuary Station transformed in ways nobody had anticipated. Owen's small desk in the stables had expanded into a proper training center, with visiting students from dozens of species coming to learn his methods. What had started as helping a few young dragons with their mounts had grown into something much larger. Owen was now teaching the principles his father had taught him to warriors, diplomats, and animal handlers from across known space. The changes went beyond just Owen's work. The dragon clans that had attended the summit were actively spreading his philosophy. Territorial disputes that would have led to violence were now being resolved through patient negotiation. Young dragons were being taught that strength came in many forms, not just fire and claws. It wasn't universal, and there was still resistance from traditionalists, but the movement was growing. Owen still worked in the stables every day. That hadn't changed. He refused to give up the hands-on work, despite his new responsibilities. Crystal still followed him everywhere, a constant companion that had become something of a symbol for the changes happening on the station. Other humans had started arriving too, hired for their skills in animal care and communication. For the first time, humans were being valued for something other than manual labor. Everything seemed to be going well. Too well, perhaps. Owen had learned that when things seemed perfect, trouble was usually close behind. The trouble arrived on a quiet afternoon. Alarms suddenly blared through the station, and Owen's communicator buzzed with an emergency message. Multiple stellar WYRMS had breached the outer hull and were loose in the civilian sections. Nobody knew how they had gotten in, but witnesses reported at least 7 of the creatures causing havoc in the market districts. Owen ran toward the affected area, Crystal racing ahead of him. When he arrived, he found chaos. People were screaming and running. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Station security was trying to contain the WYRMS, but their methods, shock nets, and stun weapons were only making the creatures more aggressive. One WIRM had already injured several people, and the others were becoming increasingly violent. Owen could see immediately what was wrong. The stellar WIRMs were terrified, not aggressive by nature. Something had driven them into the station against their will. They were lashing out because they felt trapped and threatened. Every time security attacked them, it confirmed their fear and made them more dangerous that he grabbed the nearest security officer. "Stop attacking them. You're making it worse." The officer, a large reptilian being, glared at him. "These creatures are dangerous. We have protocols for this situation. Stay back, human, before you get hurt. Your protocols are failing," Owen said firmly. "I can help, but you need to stop using force. You're just a stable hand. This requires professional security measures." Before Owen could argue further, a familiar voice boomed across the chaos. "Listen to him." Grandfather Ash appeared, along with Grandmother Frost and Elder Smoke. The three ancient dragons moved through the crowd with authority. Owen Fletcher is a recognized specialist in creature behavior. If he says your methods are wrong, they are wrong. The security officer looked uncertain but nodded. "What do you propose?" Owen's mind raced. 7 stellar WIRMs, all panicked, in an enclosed space full of civilians. This was far more complex than calming one creature in a controlled arena. But the principles were the same. First, evacuate everyone who isn't needed. The more people running and screaming, the more scared the WIRMs become. Second, stop all aggressive actions. No weapons, no nets, no loud noises. Third, give them space and let me try to calm them. "That will take too long," the security officer protested. "They could hurt more people." "They will definitely hurt more people if you keep attacking them," Owen shot back. "Your way is guaranteed to fail. Mine at least has a chance." The old guard intervened again. "Do as he says," Grandmother Frost commanded. "We will help maintain order." Station security reluctantly agreed. They began evacuating civilians while the old guard created a perimeter around the affected area. Owen was left in a large market plaza with 7 panic stellar WIRMs and Crystal by his side. It was the most dangerous situation he had ever been in, and he was terrified. But he couldn't show that fear. The WIRMs would sense it. He took a deep breath and started walking toward the nearest WIRM. It was backed into a corner, its crystalline scales flashing with stress. Owen stopped about 20 feet away and sat down, just as he had done in the arena months ago. Crystals settled beside him, making a calm, chirping sound. The cornered WIRM watched him suspiciously. Owen began humming his grandmother's lullaby, the same song that had worked before. His voice was shaky at first, but he forced himself to continue. Minutes passed. The WIRM gradually stopped thrashing. Its breathing slowed. Finally, it took a cautious step toward him. Owen didn't move. He kept humming, kept projecting calm. The WIRM came closer, sniffed him carefully, then settled down nearby. 1 down, 6 to go. The other WIRMs had been watching. Seeing one of their kind calm down seemed to affect them. They stopped their aggressive displays and watched Owen with curiosity. He stood slowly and walked toward the next WIRM, still humming. Crystal followed, and now the first WIRM followed as well. This became the pattern. Owen would approach a WIRM, sit with it until it calmed, then move to the next one. Each calmed WIRM would join his growing group, their presence helping to soothe the others. It was like a chain reaction, fear being replaced by calm, aggression giving way to curiosity. IT took over an hour, but eventually all 7 stellar WIRMs were resting peacefully in the plaza, gathered around Owen like students around a teacher. He sat in the middle of them, exhausted and shaking from adrenaline, but relieved. Nobody had been seriously hurt, and the creatures were safe. The watching crowd erupted in cheers. Dragons and other species alike applauded what they had witnessed. Owen felt embarrassed by the attention, as always, but also satisfied. He had proven that his methods worked even in crisis situations. The old guard approached, all 3 looking proud. "Well done, young human," Elder Smoke said. "You have proven yourself yet again. What I don't understand, Owen said, catching his breath, is how these WYRMS got in. They don't just wander into stations. Someone must have released them deliberately. Grandfather Ash nodded grimly. We know. Station security has already identified the culprits. A faction of traditional dragons who oppose the changes happening here. They thought releasing wild creatures would prove that your methods were inadequate for real emergencies. They wanted to discredit you and return to the old ways. Their plan failed spectacularly, Grandmother Frost added. Instead of proving your methods weak, they proved them essential. What would have been a catastrophe with dozens injured or killed was resolved without serious harm. The traditionalists are now facing serious legal consequences. Owen felt a mix of emotions. Anger that someone would endanger innocent people to make a political point. Sadness that his work had created enough controversy to inspire such actions. But also determination to continue, because clearly the work was needed. What happens now, he asked. Now, Elder Smoke said, we make you an official representative of the Old Guard. We grant you full diplomatic status and the authority to speak on our behalf across dragon territories. Owen's eyes went wide. What? No, I'm not a diplomat. I'm just a stable hand who's good with animals. You are far more than that, Grandmother Frost said gently. You are a teacher, a peacemaker, and a bridge between species. You have demonstrated wisdom that most beings never achieve in their entire lives. You represent everything we've been trying to teach our kind. That true strength comes from understanding, that power without wisdom is tyranny, and that the most profound changes often come from the most humble sources. But I don't want status or power, Owen protested. I just want to work with animals and teach people who want to learn. That is exactly why you deserve this honor, Grandfather Ash said. Because you do not seek it. Because you remain humble despite your achievements. Because you still measure your worth by the quality of your work, not the recognition you receive. These qualities make you the perfect choice. The three ancient dragons produced a medallion, a beautiful piece of craftsmanship showing a dragon and a human standing side by side. This marks you as an official speaker for the Old Guard, Grandmother Frost explained. It gives you the right to participate in dragon councils, to speak at diplomatic gatherings, and to teach our philosophy across known space. You need not accept it, but we hope you will. Owen looked at the medallion, then at the 7 stellar WYRMS resting peacefully around him, then at Crystal, who had been his constant companion. He thought about River and the other young dragons he had taught. He thought about the clan leaders who had thanked him for helping them avoid war. He thought about his father's teachings and his grandmother's lullaby. Finally, he nodded. I'll accept it, but only on one condition. Name it, Elder Smoke said. I keep working in the stables. I don't care what titles or honors I receive. I'm not giving up the work that matters. Diplomacy and politics are fine, but animals still need care. That comes first. The Old Guard exchanged amused glances. Agreed, Grandfather Ash said. In fact, we would be disappointed if you had answered any other way. You will be the only diplomat in galactic history who shovels manure as part of his official duties. Owen grinned. Good, that's settled then. The ceremony that followed was brief, but significant. Dragons from multiple clans came to witness Owen receiving his medallion. Humans in the crowd whispered excitedly, proud to see one of their own being honored by dragonkind. Other species watched with interest, wondering what this meant for the galaxy's future. Owen stood before the crowd, wearing simple stable clothes that smelled of hay and work, with his stellar WYRM resting its head on his shoulder. He looked completely out of place among the formal diplomats and warriors. And yet, in that moment, he represented something they all needed. The reminder that wisdom could come from anywhere, that status mattered less than character, and that the smallest actions could create the largest changes. Grandfather Ash spoke to the assembled crowd. Let this human be an example to all of us. He came to this station as nobody important, expected nothing, demanded nothing, and simply did his work with care and dedication. In doing so, he taught ancient beings lessons we had forgotten. He prevented wars not through threats, but through kindness. He mastered dangerous creatures not through force, but through patience. He has changed dragon culture forever, And he did it while remaining exactly who he has always been, a stable hand who loves his work. The crowd applauded. Owen bowed awkwardly, still not comfortable with attention. When the ceremony ended, he immediately returned to the stables. There were animals that needed feeding, stalls that needed cleaning, and students who would arrive tomorrow wanting to learn. The medallion hung around his neck, but to Owen it was just decoration. What mattered was the work. Crystal followed him back, chirping contentedly. The other 6 WRMs followed as well, apparently deciding they liked the stable area. Owen would need to find appropriate housing for them, which would be a challenge. But he found himself looking forward to it. Just another problem to solve, another set of creatures to understand and care for. That evening, Owen sat in the stables writing a letter to his father back on the colony world. He told him about everything that had happened, about the dragons and the summit and the stellar WIRMS. But what he really wanted to say was simple. Thank you for teaching me that gentleness is strength, that patience is power, and that treating all beings with respect is never wrong. Your lessons changed my life. They might have changed the galaxy too. He sealed the letter and set it aside for tomorrow's mail transport. Then he leaned back against Crystal's warm scales and looked around the stables. Animals of a dozen species rested peacefully in their stalls. Tomorrow, students would come to learn. The day after, he would attend a diplomatic function representing the old guard. But tonight, he was just Owen Fletcher, stable hand, doing the work he loved. The old guard had chosen him to matter. But the truth was, he had always mattered. Every small act of kindness, every patient moment with a frightened creature, every gentle word spoken when force would have been easier, they had all mattered. The universe had simply taken longer to notice than the animals had. And in the end, that was the real lesson. Everyone matters. Every kind action ripples outward. Every choice to understand rather than dominate creates change. The stable boy had proved that, not by becoming something he wasn't, but by remaining exactly who he was and refusing to accept that gentleness was weakness, in a galaxy that measured worth by power and fire. One human with a lullaby and a patient heart had reminded everyone that there were different kinds of strength. Better kinds, stronger kinds, the kinds that built bridges instead of walls, that created partnerships instead of conquests, that changed minds instead of breaking them. The old dragons had known this truth once, long ago. They had simply needed a stable boy to help them remember. And remember they did.